So good evening, everyone. This session is recorded. So first, welcome, Stu, and thank you for sparing time. I suppose you're on leave at the moment or no?
No, we went back to work on January 2nd.
Okay, yeah. No, yeah. So thank you for sparing time and talking about emerging trends in technology and pedagogies. And for the students' information, Stu is at University of New England, and he has written quite a lot. And I have shared his website with you. So you would have, if you have time, just have a look if you didn't so far. Also, I acknowledge traditional owner of the land where we meet and study and do all amazing things. So I pay my respect to past, present, and emerging. Stu said that he has not prepared any PowerPoint, and that would be, I think, amazing because then we are constantly interacting and people are not looking at the slides. But if there is no slide, that means that I will not be able to share anything. But whatever links or anything that Stu shares throughout the presentation, I'll be sharing it with you. Recording of this meeting will be on YouTube, just for analytical purpose, Stu, and then I just keep it on YouTube. Over to you, Stu, and please introduce yourself so that all the details about your achievements and your writing and your interest, because that would be really good. And you never know, one of these will be learning with you in future, who knows?
Yeah, sounds good. Hey, everybody, I'm Stu. As Kashmira mentioned, thanks, Kashmira, by the way. Feel free to turn your camera off and get some rest. Sounds like you had a long trip. So I'm a lecturer in ICT education at University of New England. Personally, I think ICT is kind of an older term because I think in the schools, they've switched over to saying like digital technologies or digital technologies for learning, things like that. So hopefully I'll get a name change or a title change, not a name change, in the next couple of months, or we'll see how that goes. So a little bit about me. I've been working around learning technologies, educational technologies, since I was like first year undergraduate. I worked in a university in America, just doing kind of learning technology support. And this was when we had like a few data projectors, but I was like that kid who like wheeled around overhead projectors and turned VHS things on. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I've been doing this since then. And then I was crazy enough to do my PhD a few years ago and did some research into how iPads can help kids learn. So yeah, I've just sort of, I was mainly professional staff until I did my PhD. So yeah, that was about 20 years of being a learning designer, ed tech kind of support person, educational developer. We could talk about the terms in this field for a long time, but yeah, so that's a little bit about me. As Kashmira said, I didn't prepare any slides. I didn't want to just talk at you and have you be bored for 40 minutes or whatever that is. So what I have is a Miro board, and I'll put the link in the chat. Let me just make sure that works. Yeah, there it is. And if you haven't used Miro before, what it is, it's just basically like a what is that called? Like a bulletin board sort of thing, a virtual bulletin board. And I'll share my screen as well so you can see it. So for those of you who can, Georgia, I know you're driving, so please do not participate in this activity. But what I want you to do is just, I want this sort of to be sourced by you. So whatever you're interested in, use the blue posties for kind of pedagogies, teaching practices, things like that you're interested in. And then for the green posties, just use, put in some learning technologies you're interested in. Okay, so I put the link in the chat. It's there. I'm going to start sharing my screen so we can all see what we're doing. And there's not that many of us, so whatever you're interested in doing, feel free to, you just click into the little boxes and then you can say, all right, I'm going to, what's an obvious learning technology we can do? Ooh, online exam. So just click into it or double click into it and you can type. AR, VR, nice, nice.
I just said I'm saying AR VR creation because people can use it, but if I, as a teacher, if I wanted to create something, what's the easiest way to do it?
Yeah.
Because I mean, in reality, we don't have, our teachers doesn't have any very sophisticated technology in the school.
Yeah. 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 A lot of this stuff just relies on third-party created stuff. Yeah.
So it has to be in green, isn't it? I'm not following your rules.
There you go. Yeah, so whoever's participating online, put those in, because otherwise you're just at my mercy for what I'm going to talk about, because I have my own interests. But I want to make sure that I'm covering what you're interested in doing. So. And you can also resize these things if you want to make them bigger. Move them around. Pebble pad, nice.
So for information, students just submitted their first assignment, which was creating a portfolio through Pebble Pad.
Oh, cool, right on. Ah, yes, the 8 ways. Nice. Let's give a couple more minutes. Different pedagogies can drive teaching in. Just going to sort these around. VR creation. Ways. Online quizzing. Yeah, yeah. Factors affecting the use of technologies. Yeah, these are all really good. Wikipedia, that's a great source for your academic writing, right? Cool. All right. Yeah. So if you're participating, feel free to chime in on that one. These are really, really good. So we're looking at the 8 ways. We're looking at AR, VR creation, online exams. That's mine. I'll delete that one. That's boring. But quizzes we've got. I'll just move that to the top. And factors affecting the use of technologies. One thing that I also did want to show you is, I'm sure Kazmira has shown you this, but there is this thing called the EDUCAUSE Horizon Report, and it comes out every year around the autumn or the North American spring. And basically what it is, it's a report done by a bunch of educators by this EDUCAUSE organization, and they just put out a list of trends every single year. And there's a teaching and learning track, and there's a bunch of different other tracks. And yeah, so a lot of times some folks who work for the Ascolite organization, they'll contextualize it for the Australian context, which is really cool. But I had the report open. Let me put the link in the chat if you want to follow along for that. And this is a really cool thing because it actually kind of tells you what the trends are that people are kind of thinking about. So I'm just going to scroll through this, and it says the trends. They usually break it up into categories: social trends, technology trends, economic trends, and things like that. And then they have key technologies and practices. So they have listed AI for learning analytics, AI for learning tools. AI is apparently pretty big. The hybrid learning spaces. and mainstreaming hybrid learning modalities, micro-credentials, and then professional development for hybrid remote teaching. So obviously you look at these things and it's sort of a response to the pandemic, right? We were thrown into that and a lot of students realized, hey, I actually don't need to come to class ever. So it's really interesting. And if you want to look through this, they provide a lot of details on all of these trends. So it's like, just for example, we've got, where are we here? Economic trend, just teaching.
So isn't this for only higher education?
Yes, they do usually do a primary and secondary one as well. So if you just sort of hunt around the website, it'll show you. I think they have all the different other versions of the Horizon report here.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so yeah, so they have hybrid. So they contextualize it for primary and secondary, but I think they've only done that a couple of years.
Yeah.
But still useful to have a look at.
Yeah.
Another thing that we can source. So we've got our board that we can look at. Oh, there's a comment on that one. What's that? Integrating ICT into the pedagogical framework. Yeah. I was playing around with this thing called ChatGPT. Have you chatted about that in class yet?
No.
No. So there's this thing, the OpenAI Foundation, they just create and test a whole bunch of AI tools. And this ChatGPT thing has been, I think it came out late last year, like maybe October, November. And what it is kind of a natural language chat bot that will just scour the internet. And yeah, Joy, it's pretty cool. So what I thought I might do is just say, ask this thing what it thinks the emerging trends are. So do we want to focus on a particular context? Do we want to say in primary and secondary, or do we want to say in university, or where do we want to say that?
Just primary and secondary, let's say.
Okay. And I'll just say learning technology for primary and secondary.
Recording in progress.
All right, so it spits out the answers. Yeah, so a lot of folks that I know are worried about it because it'll write an essay for you if you want it to, and it does a pretty darn good job.
Yes.
So a lot of discussion around assessment and written assessment is happening around this. So that's one of the things that we're chatting about in one of my classes, and my students are just sort of the mind that it's something that we need to be aware of, but it also can be kind of a helper or a co-creation tool. Like I was playing on it the other day, and just to show you what I've been working on it, it writes code. It writes programming code. Is that loading? No, not loading. So yeah, it doesn't write functional code. It broke, but at least it was a kind of a start for me because I'm still learning to code. So according to this AI chat, oh, there's my code. Sorry. Okay, it's saying that the trends are blended learning, adaptive learning, gamification, virtual and augmented reality. We have that. Artificial intelligence. That seems like a big one. Collaborative learning in virtual classrooms. And this is saying, like, due to the pandemic, right? We do have flare-ups, and I think some people are using the word post-COVID and things like that. I don't know what you think, but pandemic still seems to be around, or at least COVID still seems to be around. And then mobile learning. How do we use iPads and smartphones with kids? That's obviously a fraught thing. There's nuance to it, but yeah, I just thought this would be another good source of information as well. And then, of course, you can ask it about all of these things. But I'm just going to go back to our post here. And yeah, so I can just speak to some of these things that we're looking at. And so PebblePad, how did you find that in terms of what it was used for and the kind of use of that technology? Because e-portfolios have been around for what, 20 years, something like that? Feel free to share in the chat your experiences with that, or verbally if you want to.
Okay. So there are some, I think
Joe was trying to say something.
Yeah, sorry, I I have been out of out of school for 30 years.
Mm.
So this is all new to me, but in my second year, this is the first time I've been asked to do a portfolio in this form. But when we did our last assignment, I could see like immediately how it would have helped when I was on prac. So on prac, I was just surprised that these things weren't being used in secondary schooling.
Yeah.
Especially now that you've just said they've been around for that long. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. And Virendra?
Yeah, same like Joy. This was the first time I got introduced to PebblePad. Initially, I thought I would be struggling. I don't know how to go about it. Once I started understanding the depth and the ways, I went through a couple of the recorded lectures which Kashmira shared with us, along with the senior lecturer John. And when I was able to appreciate how versatile this tool could be, and I was straight away able to understand that perhaps after completing my qualification, I need to look out for a job. This could become a very potent resource for me. And if I start working from now onwards, it could give me at least 1 year of a solid time where I can build on this resource and make myself more presentable in terms and ready in terms of when I'm presenting myself in front of the interview board and talking about myself and how I propose to talk about the science or maths or technology into the secondary platform or the secondary setting of the education. So I really find it very good. I'm still honestly learning about it, but I know it's a long way to go about, but I'm definitely very, very optimistic about it.
Yeah. Because as opposed to creating something that is just sort of the end product of your learning, like a portfolio is really good at capturing the process of learning. It's like when I was doing my teaching degree years ago, they were always about, well, is assessment a measure of the product or the process? And that's a really interesting consideration, right? Especially when we're thinking about how technology can basically capture all these little touch points that we make. Yeah. That got me also thinking about, I'm sure Kashmira has shared this, but there's this thing called open education. This is more around the pedagogy side of things. And this guy named David Wiley in the US came up with it, or he was like one of the early researchers in it. And basically he has this thing around open pedagogies. And what open pedagogies mean is basically that you have open educational resources, which are kind of free to access materials, YouTube videos, open textbooks, free textbooks, things like that, that are all like, so my website, for example, is an example of an open textbook or some variation thereof. But open pedagogy just sort of leverages that ability to communicate with the outside world and leverage that information to the point where students can actually create and share beyond their classroom, right? Because I don't know about when you did your maybe undergrad or when you were in school, I always felt like whatever I created, the only person who ever saw it was my teacher. And then they make some subjective judgment about it. They throw a mark on it, and then I never use it again. It was just, yeah. And so Wiley calls that a disposable assignment because, yeah, you're not going to use it again, right? So that idea of capturing our learning experiences and capturing our process through a portfolio like PebblePad and things like that, that's actually useful to us when we go for jobs because we can demonstrate that we've done stuff and made stuff. So that's the whole idea there. I know quite a few people who use PebblePad, quite a few people who even use like blog platforms like WordPress and Google Sites and stuff, because that way they can just, if whatever tool they're comfortable using, they can use that and it just lives as long as they want it to live and they have control over it after they graduate, right? So yeah, so that's one of these things. I think there was a note here around where how different pedagogies drive teaching, but also how different technologies can drive teaching because it gives us an affordance to do something new, right? Yeah, pretty interesting stuff.
Now
I was wiki. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just thinking, there was a big discussion around whether technology first or pedagogy first. And there is an like emerging theory from somebody from I think UK, and
Yeah.
so his name is Tim Phone.
Right
Yeah.
ahead, way ahead of you.
And he's talking about this untangled pedagogy, which is like really interesting idea, because it's not pedagogy first or tech. I have put it in a reference in the unit charts, but it's like, you never know that once you start having technology in, and whatever your schools can afford, or whatever is available, then you can decide upon. But it's not that like technology is driving teaching, but you are trying to kind of like make use of what you have, and do your best in a given situation, because sometimes you have like best of the best tools which can work really well, but your school doesn't have it. And I know remote schools, especially Stu in Darwin area and all of that, they're like very, very resource scarce.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you covered things like SAMR and TPAC and PICRAT and all that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So technology integration models, there's a whole bunch of different ones. And let me see if I can find. Where are we here? So yeah, I think that's the thing that about some of these is that they allow us to sort of think about technology and like approaches to integrating them. Where are we here? Yeah, so there's SAMR, the substitution, augmentation, modification, or redefinition. TPAC, I find it more kind of conceptual. There's the picture of it there. And yeah, so you've got your pedagogical knowledge, technological knowledge, and content knowledge, and those sort of interact with each other. I find the TPAC model, it's been around for years, but it's not so applicable. It's kind of hard. It's more like conceptual and abstract. But the PICRAT one's really good because it lets you actually go like, okay, well, I'm going to change this from a passive experience to a creative or interactive experience. And then I'm going to replace a chalkboard or whiteboard with a Miro board or something like that. So you're actually able to kind of see what you're doing and how you're moving through this. So that sort of goes back to that idea of how technology can drive what we're doing, the pedagogy as well. So yeah, I like that idea of entangled pedagogies. George is saying I definitely noticed a difference in the age of the teacher, like if somebody finished recently versus 30 years ago. Yeah, like everybody's time poor, especially teachers, right? So it's it makes difference to be able to have access to things and have that time to explore, because whether or not we have that time to explore in schools, whether we're afforded that, that's another thing, right?
Yeah. So for students' information, if you have not gone through the content, all the contents obviously as yet, in week 8 we are covering technology integration models, TPAC, RAT and SMAR, and also PICRAT as well. So they're all in week 8 for EST 204, and in week 5 in EST 504.
Sorry if I jumped ahead there. teaser. Yeah, so let's have a look at this other one. Is this wikis in general or Wikipedia in general?
I think wiki as a tool, I guess.
Wiki as a tool, yeah.
That's not my input, but like.
No, that's fine, yeah.
That was from me. And it was just in regard to like, it kept coming up as like a collaborative like online discussion thing where I kept reading things like students can contribute to like blogs or wikis. And I was a little bit like unsure what that was.
Yeah, so Wiki is the basis of Wikipedia. It's just a platform where you can edit the content, right? And it is a Web 2.0 technology. So in my opinion, it's pretty old. Yeah, because Wikipedia has been around for that long. I don't use wikis in my teaching anymore because there's tools like the one that we're looking at right now, right? There's co-creative tools with Google Docs, like even Word Online has capability for collaboration now. So OneNote is a really great kind of tabbed document. Then there's so many tools out there now. Wikis were maybe the only game in town 20 years ago, and they're not anymore. But yeah, so wikis are, I mean, if you look at the foundational function of a lot of these. That's what I kind of instill in my students. It's like, well, what does a wiki do? It allows students to edit, create, and collaborate on something that they're making, right? And so if you're looking at that goal as a teacher, then there's thousands of tools literally that will let you do that. It's just, what's the selection look like when you're making those calls, right? So it could be a wiki, could be a discussion board, could be a blog, could be a Miro board, could be a Word doc, could be any number of things, right? Yeah. What else we got? 8 ways, yeah. If you're unfamiliar with the 8 ways, 8ways.online is just a framework for embedding Indigenous ways of knowing, learning, and being in teaching, right? So I think it was developed by, there's a scholar named Tyson Young Kaporta who developed this stuff with a team. This was years ago. And basically what it is it taps into Indigenous ways of learning and knowing and being, and you can embed this all in your teaching. So it's really interesting that I include this in my emerging kind of pedagogies class as well. This stuff is like hundreds and thousands of years old. It's not emerging. It's just sort of emerging to the dominant culture, which is really, really interesting, right? So you look at this and go like, ooh, we can like do all of these things that people have been doing for millennia and call it emerging, but it's really not, right? It's just kind of surfacing what has been done for thousands and thousands of years before like the concept of education even started. So
yeah, or maybe just giving a new look.
Yeah, exactly. And I worked with some Indigenous scholars back in Canada, and they were kind of teaching this similar concepts, obviously, but through the lens of technology-enabled learning. So you look at these things and you can say, well, like learning maps, how would you do that with technology? I don't know, like a Google, like you can draw on using your iPad or something like that. You can like draw out concept maps and things like that. Like Miro does concept maps. There's a whole bunch of tools that do that. Story sharing, like digital stories have been a thing for 20, 30 years, like having kids like record videos and do stories, and land links, place-based learning, have people go out into country, take pictures, geocache, do all of those things. And a lot of this stuff is technology enables it, right? And then same thing with symbols and images, obviously the meaning of multimedia learning, things like that. So a lot of these can just directly apply to the use of technology in the classroom and what we do in the classroom as well. And I think that's a part of Indigenous or Aboriginal education, and those sorts of subjects that you're going to take at uni, they'll kind of go more in depth around the pedagogical approaches to how to do this with kids, right?
Yeah. And also non-linear, we emphasize it as a lot as well, that it's like any teaching is always a non-linear activity, because we have a different cohort, and that also is covered in the week when we are talking about UDL.
Yeah. I did this MOOC. A MOOC, if you're unfamiliar, is a massive open online class. And it's one of those free classes that is online, and it takes about 6 weeks to finish. And I think the completion rates are somewhere around like 15%. I did this MOOC all about Indigenous education based on the Canadian context, because that's where obviously I'm from. But one of the things that I learned in here was really, really interesting. It was talking about, in terms of like storytelling, a lot of Indigenous stories don't have an ending, and they purposely link to other stories. So it's like, it's predicated on your hearing other stories. And I was chatting with one of my colleagues about this, and it's like, yeah, like a lot of times when we teach, we just give 100% of the information the students need to know, and then we have them regurgitate it and spit it back, right? If you remember that sort of learning. And this way, it's almost like a puzzle that you have to put together. If you purposefully leave out information, then the student has to be the one to kind of draw conclusions and make that connection between what they already know and what they are actually learning. So in that way, I think it's ingenious, and that is in itself is pretty innovative, because we don't really teach that way, right?
Could you please put the link into the chat for that?
Oh, sure, yeah. I'm not sure when the next offering of this is. Let's see. Oh, there it is. So this is from edX, the platform they use. They do MOOCs all over the place. It starts February 1. There you go. Perfect. Yeah, it's about 6 weeks long. It's just a bunch of videos and quizzes and stuff like that, but it's really, really interesting. And again, a Canadian context. So if you're more interested in the Australian one, I'm not actually sure what's on offer in terms of Australian context, but yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the 8 ways. I know there's others. I've heard through the grapevine that Tyson is sort of like moving on from the 8 ways to look at a more kind of nuanced approach, but at least this introduces folks from the dominant culture who may not be familiar with these approaches, and it's a good gateway into that. What else have we got? Quizzes. Who put quizzes? I put exams, but yeah. What's that all about, Joey?
Again, it was just like the contrast in my last prac, where a lot of the younger or newer teachers were using all these online quizzes, and the older one that they weren't. But it was kind of chaos as well in the classrooms that we're using them. It's about one of the, I'm just trying to think of any. I was just trying to put up any kind of technologies that I could think of before.
Yeah, because there's ones like Kahoot, right?
Yeah.
And these are sort of gamified versions of quizzes. Oh, there's one of my cookies, reject all, bye-bye. Yeah, so there's a bunch of tools like this. There's another one that I saw years ago called Plickers. I don't know if you've seen this one. Basically, it uses QR codes and it's super low tech. You basically just print out physical sheets of paper and the students like respond. It's almost like a classroom response system, and they hold up their answers based on the code and they can rotate them, and then you scan the room essentially, and then you get answers. So that's kind of fun. Sort of quizzes, sort of more audience response. Yeah, Virendra?
Another similar example is could be of BlueKit, where it provides a platform to entire class students participating in that particular thing, and they have to basically, they're working on answering the questions based on topics, but again then they get a chance to hack into the other students' account and steal their points.
Oh, what? Yikes.
Yeah, so that's basically the BlueKit about.
Yeah.
And students, that's it. So,
Yep.
so it's I've seen students really enjoying this thing as well, and it
Yeah,
also
yeah.
gives them creating their own avatars, funny ways, and all those things, and quite engaging for. That's what I found even in a middle school, year 9, 10s levels as well. The students enjoy a lot.
Yeah.
So just for our interest, can you tell me what's your experience? What kind of technologies that schools are using in your placement schools, or if you're working, then you're in your own school? What sort of technology? Because my kids are in this school and they mostly have Google Docs and Google Suite basically.
So the place where I'm working in, that's in regional South Australia called Barrie, the Riverland area. And our school and most of the classes, they use BlueKit, as I mentioned. Obviously, they do use Kahoot. They enjoy that as well. These are the 2 primary platforms which students are using, where have been so far.
Yeah. Oh, BlueKit. Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, so when you were talking about all of this stuff, it sort of brought me back because I'm really interested in the psychology of how people learn. And so there's this thing called retrieval practice. If you're interested in that, that's basically the science behind formative quizzing. So there's years and years of research on this stuff around like what is effective, how often you should do it, like spacing versus cramming, all of that sort of stuff. So if you're interested, just do a Google Scholar search for retrieval practice and you'll probably find, and even like retrieval practice Kahoot, you might be able to find some stuff if you're interested. Yeah, that's really, really interesting stuff.
Just put that link in there.
Oh, this one, sure. Oh, I don't know if it's going to give me a token or something. Who knows? Yeah, Brenda.
Can I also add to what you were just suggesting? A lot of research work has also been done on these formative assessment practices like Kahoot. especially 2015 onwards, which shows that students really have a very good engagement, and also helps in including other all type of learners, basically, which increases the teachers being effective while they're teaching any concept or a topic in the lesson. So that has been the finding of the research of late, which has.
Yeah, and that sort of brings up another point. I'm just trying to find something real quick here. Is the aspect of, let's see if I can find this, privacy around these issues, right? Well, because if we're using platforms in the classroom that are third-party tools that aren't really supported by the institution, then what information is being collected from our students who are children, right? It's, we were just talking about this morning with my students, and then the fact is that a lot of stuff that we kind of take for granted or we don't fully think about, the law never really catches up. So there is some work being done in this, and in terms of like how we look at technology and kind of understand how the tools are being used for the profit of other companies, right? So it's something we really need to be mindful of. I'll put the link to this article. This just came out, I think, last month or December 25th. There we go. And these are some colleagues at Wollongong who just sort of took this approach to looking at Epic, which is like a reading app, and then PME collection, and looked at sort of the companies behind them, the data collection policies and procedures, who owns what, where does the data go, and all of that stuff that we never read the terms and conditions when we sign up for these things, right? So these are the things that we really need to be mindful of as well.
And also, Stu, one of my colleague, when I was working with the Faculty of Law, she said that even though that they said when they collect the data that, oh, it is completely private and we don't sell data and it is for, you know, this is purpose only, but that's really not true.
Yep. I remember seeing one. I won't say the company, but it was like a pretty big company in the ed tech space, and they were just changing their terms and conditions to basically say, we're going to use your data. Yes, we're going to use it for product improvement. And then it turned out that a lot of their subsidiaries and things like that were totally different platforms, and they were just sort of grabbing data and like sharing it amongst their subsidiary companies, and basically, essentially, a lot of times using it for marketing purposes. So they'll go like, oh, okay, well, you're looking at this, you're doing this within our apps, and we're gonna maybe what's the adjective for target? We're gonna target you for selling you more products based on how you use our existing products.
And
right?
they said, oh, we are customizing it for you, but actually that's
not exactly
anything that I search. Those kind of advertise comes up on my, web pages. That means that they're tracking, and Google says it's like, we are like, you can change your privacy settings on your Google account, but no, I mean, once it is out there, like it's very, very exposed, and kind of they will, if you're not aware, then they will drive your choices.
Yeah, and if you look at a lot of the private companies now we visit, like that, you can control your cookies up to wazoo. You can like be very granular around how you can control what you're giving to these companies. But go to Google Classroom, go to Moodle, go to Canvas. Like you usually don't have that choice with these platforms, which is an issue. So that sort of brings us full circle back to our AI friend who says that adaptive learning is a technology. So adaptive learning specifically adjusts the learning experience based on the student's performance. And it's personalized learning essentially based on data. So again, where do these come from? Who's the company and all of that stuff?
So do we have this link into our chat? I'm just conscious about the people who are not attending.
I don't know if I can actually copy this because the chat tool itself requires a login. So let me see.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's just chat openai.com.
Yeah, exactly. And all the things that we're talking about, definitely be mindful of your own privacy when you're using these tools, because the whole point of these, I think it's a not-for-profit. They do take donations, but the whole point of this is they are going to mine what you do so that they can improve it later on. Whether or not they do that for profit, who knows? But yeah, so just be mindful of the use of that. I think this was the same organization that did the DALL-E image generator a few months ago, where you could like type in, I want to see Santa Claus as a sea otter wearing a bowler hat, and it would actually make a picture that is exactly that if you want. So
Oh,
really
wow.
cool for content generation, but
So what is it? Sorry.
it's called DALL-E. Let me bring that up as well.
You already have that tab. there.
Yeah. So let's see. Santa on a motorcycle in pop art style. I don't, it was kind of slow today, but a lot of my artist friends are really mindful of this one because, yeah, there we go. Everything that is created usually by AI needs to be trained. It's like machine learning, right? It needs to be fed information in order to be able to create new things. And so a lot of times these particular tools are just scraping the internet of artists' work that is their own, but they never gave permission to these tools to be able to create and source it. So super cool, but yeah, there's also issues. So I think what we're learning here is that there's always caveats, there's always pros and cons, and just with any technology it can either be, I think people were just like kind of drawing parallels, it's either good or evil. I see the world more gray, but there's positive things we can do with it, and then there's maybe some damaging things we can do with it as well. So really depends. Let's see here, where are we where's our Miro? Have we covered everything? Oh, AR and VR. Cool. Has anybody tried AR VR?
Yeah, I did a little bit with
Yeah.
H5Ps too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's 360 video or 360 pictures, which are pictures you can turn around in, videos you can turn around, and it's like you're kind of standing there, but it doesn't
And
move.
with the cardboard, but cardboard cameras,
Yeah.
those like not cameras, but like those headsets.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like very primitive. I mean, even though that it gives you like a great feeling, but what we saw in Uplift, those that was like amazing. And I wonder,
Yeah.
I mean, like when we go to the conferences and we see this kind of demos, and you feel like, oh my God, I want to do it. It's so useful, and I can
Yeah.
see how kind of like immersive it is, but it is very hard. If I was I'm thinking myself as a primary or secondary teacher, having a limited resources, limited time, and because schools nowadays have lots of admin activities that teachers has to fulfill as well, writing this and that, and so that is kind of like getting onto the nerves. So I'm wondering whether there is any easier, even though it is low tech, easier way to create something more immersive.
Yeah, Virendra.
We in our school again we have these head-mounted devices using VR. Basically, they are being used in lower secondary year 7s and 8s to help them in their learning in specific areas. So that's how they are being used at our site.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So
I chatted with go ahead.
No, that's okay. You finish and
I was just saying, I was chatting with a researcher in AR, and he does stuff in HCI, which is human-computer interaction. So early days, this guy was like playing with augmented reality and things like that. The definitions are up on the screen there. And he was basically saying that we don't yet know enough about VR, like the full immersion in a fake environment, in terms of the effects on our physiology and memory and things like that. So it's kind of, he was basically saying, this is sort of like the VHS beta fight or the DVD HDVD sort of fight or Blu-ray, that augmented reality really should win because it still grounds us in the real world. It grounds us in what we know, and it just overlays digital stuff onto it. Because there's a bunch of research that's actually exploring virtual reality in terms of just motion sickness, like cyber sickness, right? People just like throw up, they get vertigo, if you have like differences in your like traumatic brain injuries, things like that, then you just can't use it, right? So being mindful of those things and the environments that you're in, then yeah, it's cool again, but is it actually viable for ubiquitous use in schools, especially with kids? You don't want a bunch of kids throwing up and falling over all over your classroom, right?
Yeah. So we have on 24th, I think, January, we have a lecture from Claire Seldon.
Mm.
She is from NSW school, like Department of Education, and she is AR, VR, AI queen.
Mm.
So she will be showing you lots of other different ideas and applications around AR, VR. So yeah.
Yeah. Cool. And yeah, let me go back to the, okay, I think we covered all those. How's our AI friend? Mobile learning, collaborative learning, virtual classrooms. And I think some of these, like, again, this sort of speaks to the shortcomings of these tools. Like you look at this and it's like, due to the pandemic, the use of virtual classrooms has increased. And we're basically back in classrooms for the most part. So it's not perfect. It gives you ideas, but it's not 100% perfect. And yeah, so mobile devices, a lot of classes are iPad based and things like that. Artificial intelligence, we're still, obviously, here's an example of that being a good idea, but it's still a lot of the AI stuff that I've seen really requires that information literacy around, well, how do you know what's good information and how do you know what's accurate, right? So yeah, cool. I'm just looking at the time. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, but if there's any questions for me.
So Abhi said, I have always wondered what the line is between use of technology in classroom and encouraging students to think on their own. I ask because on my placement, I have observed so many students just use the internet, phrases their answers and or copy paste. I wonder how we as a teacher can encourage students to use technology in a way that doesn't hamper their all through examples and recent ChatGPT controversy.
Yeah, so the chats that I've had with colleagues around that is just basically around that difference between, I mean, we've got books, right? We can look stuff up in books. Like over the years, like I think evolutionary speaking, our brains have actually gotten smaller because we specialize so much and we don't actually need to retain so much information. Maybe our brains will get much smaller after this thing. But it's that idea of like being that digital literacy and information literacy, being able to make those connections. Like if I asked you like who the first president of America was, you might already know that, but you can just look it up on Wikipedia. But what does that mean in context? If I'm asking you to solve a problem, then looking up all the facts in the world won't help you. It's making those connections between the information that you find and being able to make sound judgments around them. That's kind of the key of all of this. And we're seeing this a lot in schools, right? It's like that switch years ago to kind of inquiry-based learning and all of the stuff around one of my colleagues is working on things around transdisciplinary learning, where you're basically teaching the same concepts, but through maths, science, education, arts. They're learning they're maybe like discussing a book that they're reading, and they're tying everything into that so that the kids can actually make connections between the real world, what's happening, and like applicable skills in math, science, education, or engineering, and all of that stuff. So yeah, it sort of just goes back to that critical thinking, right? I think uni versus TAFE, I was always told that like university is where you go to learn to think and TAFE is to do, right? There's that difference. And yeah, same is true for technology. I think it can enable us and support us just like that AI tool did for me today, but it's not perfect and we still have to be able to make judgments. Right?
Yeah. So every year I have a last lecture. It's kind of a coffee time in your courses too. And I mean, students ask open-ended question, and they always ask me what's most important to teach. And I just said that it's like, if somebody is like really committed to cheating, they, no matter what tools or what kind of exam or what sort of tool you use, they are going to do it. And there are tools that can enable that, right? So only thing that you as a teacher, and that's what I think my role is as well, that you motivate your students to do the right thing and use their thinking and learn for the sake of learning rather than just, passing the unit and having those practical, gains, such as like passing the exam. And I don't underestimate, I know that everybody has to pass the exam when they're taking the course, and it involves money and time and all that commitment. But above all, it is really what you want to do and how genuinely you want to learn, and I mean, in very, very broader sense, how genuinely you want to live your life, and whatever values that you subscribe to, you want to hang on to that, and create an environment of trust in the classroom, so that the next generation also starts valuing those things, and you tie your values into the teaching and whatever activities that you do with students, especially the primary ones.
Yeah. Yeah, I just put a link in the chat there from Neil deGrasse Tyson, the astrophysicist, and he says, when students cheat on exams, it's because the school system values grades more than students value learning. Which is fair. Like, if you find a way to cheat, go for it. Just kidding. but the that kind of goes back to, there's another kind of pedagogical movement around critical digital pedagogy. There's a lab in the University of Colorado, I think, and those folks base their work on Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. If you're unfamiliar with that work, I think it was written in the 50s, 60s, something like that. And basically what this guy said was that education systems are basically built, and they still currently are built to just sort of propagate and hold up systems of inequality. And as teachers, we are kind of unwilling participants in that. And so the critical digital part of that is thinking about like how we assess, how we teach, and all of these things using technology. And they have this kind of movement called ungrading. If you just go on Twitter, like everybody's talking about that all the time now. And it's all about just basically removing marks or reducing the emphasis of marks so that students have more agency in their learning, so that there's less stress. Georgia, absolutely correct. There's a bunch of research around the anxiety and testing and how it actually harms people. So for example, I let my students assess themselves when they submit their marks. I asked them to just sort of mark themselves on the rubric I provide. If I agree with it, I give them that mark. If I don't, I tell them why. Most of the time they will undermark themselves. It's pretty interesting, but that's one of the things I do to kind of move away from that, because yeah, I hated being marked when I was a student. So yeah.
And that would be good, actually. That's a great idea.
That'd be great.
But yeah, and also peer marking and all of that we have used. But the thing is, it's a good practice as well, because once you create your work and you assume that it is worth distinction or whatever that is, but once you start marking against the criteria, then and how well you have done or not done the work. I'm just conscious of time. It's just 7:57. So anybody, if you have any questions,
yeah, that's a really good point, Abby, as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
like the measurement of people, you must be this high to ride this ride, right?
And who said, I think it's Albert Einstein who said that if you try to judge a fish by her ability to climb the trees, she will die thinking that she is no good.
Yeah, exactly.
So and I mean, sometimes too, as an academic, I feel very guilty about talking about all of this, because even though that you're kind of like talking about all of this, what should happen, but I myself can't do it with my students.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I have to have the assignment, and I have to mark them, and also I have to kind of like put the boundaries around, and I think I'm not sure to your perspective, and we can have a chat outside this, but sometimes I'm thinking why and how this concept of or idea of assessment would have emerged. Why would somebody want to do it?
Yeah.
and I sort of think that like I have about 100 students this semester through 2 courses, and some of them are like extremely inspirational. They're motivated. They ask questions. They engage well, but some they just drag along, and some structured way of treating them or making it happen, sort of like, because every course has a goal to achieve or the objectives to meet, you know. I think for them, structured information and structured assessment is a good idea, but it doesn't serve well like almost everybody. So I'm not sure what's the kind of like a balance, and how we can, as a teacher, you know, resolve this to our satisfaction, that we are doing what we are preaching, you know.
Yeah. I think that's a larger conversation, right? Philosophy of education, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Why are we here?
Yeah, no, that is even deeper, like, why are we here? But I mean, I'm thinking like, why would you do that? And
yeah. Cool. I think that's all I had.
okay, so yeah, for the assignment, I mean, I'll just stop recording and I can answer your question, shall I? So thank you, Stu.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.